Now that we have the core functionality working in this project, the next thing we want to do is go back and refactor the code a little bit to have better efficiencies so we don't have so much repetitive code occurring in our project. So one of the first things that we're going to do is modify write story so that instead of having to create all of these different variables for creating the paragraphs, creating the text nodes, creating the text that's going to go on to the text nodes, and then appending all of those, that's very repetitive code. Anytime we have something like that, that's a very good indication that we should come up with a way to instead encapsulate that into a function. And when it's in a standalone function, then we can just call upon that function. So we'll create a new function, and this function will be titled add text node, and it will take text as a parameter. So what that means is when we call this function, we will provide some text to it, and then that will put that text into the text node where we have in the create text node up here. So when we look at this and see what's happening with it, currently we create our text variable, then we're going to create a paragraph, create a text node, add the text node to the paragraph, and then add that paragraph to the story. So each one of those steps we can really just put into this function. So the first thing that we need to do is to create our new paragraph, and it's going to be the same as what we did here, where we create our paragraph, and then we will create our new text node. And we'll populate it with the text that is passed into this function. So we can already see we didn't have to create a variable to hold that text. We're just passing it directly in. So that now cuts down on things quite a bit. And now we just simply say new paragraph dot append child new text, and then the story dot append child the new paragraph. So we've taken all of this and have distilled down that functionality into a single function. Now to use it, what we need to do is just simply say add text node, and now it's looking for text, and we can now just pass that in. So I could leave these as is if you want, or I can now just paste that in. So it's not really a big deal to have those extra variables. If we wanted it to, we just call that value and put it in, or we can put it in directly and not use a variable. So both would be acceptable. It's just going to look a little bit cleaner if I just do that. Add text node, story, text 2. Add text node, story, text 3. Like that, and now all of this goes away. So we've now condensed all of that into just calling this function. And if I have more than 3 paragraphs, if I have 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, this is going to be a significant improvement in our code. We can also see how it really makes it a little bit easier to read what's going on because we're adding the text node with that text. And now, and perhaps instead of calling add text node, we could even just call it add new paragraph or add story paragraph. I mean, so the naming can be, I was focused on the text node and adding the text when I created this, so that's why I've used that name. but we certainly could name it something different. So we can see how that cleans it up. It still maintains the security of we're not taking form information and allowing HTML to be written to it, which could contain a malicious script. So that does make that a much better approach. So already our project is getting cleaner just by that simple addition of what's going on. Now we do have this this section here where we are removing that as part of our house cleaning option. And when we do that at the beginning, so that makes this work correctly each time. But I'm also cleaning house under reset page, where we're calling that as well. So with that, if I'm doing this, an easy thing I could do is I could just put those 3 lines in a function so that I just call that function. That would be a way to take care of that. To put this into a function, I will just simply create a function and call this remove pink BG. And within that, just grab those, paste in, so that now removes that, and then all we have to do is call remove pink BG. So we just call that function. Now, if I go back up into my check where I'm doing that, we can now hide that and remove pink BG. So now that calls it. So it simplifies it, it cleans it up. As long as we've named this correctly so that we know what it means, it's easy to see. We can now call that function, and then that's a better optimization to the code as we are working with it. We could probably look at some other optimizations if we wanted in relation to setting the display block and display none, either playing around with the class list options. So we establish, if we had the class established in the beginning, then we could start toggling those as well. So there's a couple of different options, but this is a very straightforward, and I do think it makes it easy to read. And one of the things to keep in mind is when we do optimizations to the code and we are setting it up to try to be efficient, we have to keep in mind, are we making it computer readable so it's very efficient for the computer, or are we trying to maintain a human readability factor so that as I look through the code, it's easy to see and understand what is happening in that code? Because if the code is getting too complex, too convoluted, too where it's now hard to understand without having to read it and reread it, at that point, optimizations aren't necessarily going to be helping us unless they're mission critical for performance. So we always want to try and maintain some level of human readability to make our code better to read and understand. We can sometimes do that through comments. Other times we can be a little bit more verbose with our coding so that it is just straightforward and easy to see.